Welcome back, everyone, to Echoes of Ihsan, where we, as always, take these deep dives into Islamic teachings and really try to, figure out how they can inspire us to live better, more meaningful lives. And today we're going to go on a journey through the Sahih Bukhari. Specifically, we're looking at Book 29, Penalty of Hunting, while on pilgrimage.
Interesting.
Now, when I first saw that title, I thought, hunting? What does that have to do with pleasing God and striving for excellence?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem like the most obvious connection, right?
Right. But trust me, this deep dive is going to be full of surprises.
I think what's really fascinating about this is that these rulings on hunting during pilgrimage, a time of heightened spiritual awareness, right, devotion, really kind of reveal this profound understanding of our relationship with the natural world and the sanctity of life and the importance of balance in our actions.
It's about so much more than a list of rules.
Absolutely.
So to really set the stage, let's go back in time to the time of the Prophet Muhammad and dive into one of the most intriguing stories from this book, the story of Abu Qatada.
Okay.
You've heard this one?
I have, yeah.
All right, so give us a little bit of context.
So imagine it's the year of Al-Hudaybiyah, a really pivotal moment in early Islamic history, and the Prophet Muhammad and his companions, they're on their journey to Mecca for pilgrimage. And as you know, during pilgrimage, Muslims enter into this state of ritual purity. It's called Ihram.
Right.
And it involves, specific restrictions, and one of those is a prohibition on hunting.
Right, and it's all about shifting your focus, inward and shedding those worldly distractions and really just focusing on spiritual purification.
Precisely. So this is where it gets interesting. Abu Qatada's companions, they had all entered the state of Ihram. But for some reason, Abu Qatada himself, he hadn't yet. And as they were traveling, they spot an onager. And an onager, it's a wild donkey-like creature native to the region.
I can just picture it, unfolding right there in the desert, the anticipation of the pilgrimage, and suddenly this onager appears.
Yeah. And Abu Qatada, because he wasn't bound by the restrictions of Ihram in that moment, he decides to seize this opportunity.
Right.
He pursues the onager,
Wow.
ultimately catches it and kills it. He goes back to his companions, and I'm sure he's expecting them to help him with this unexpected bounty, but they refuse.
Oh.
They remind him, hey, we're in Ihram, and we cannot participate in hunting.
That must have been an awkward moment.
Yeah.
What did they do? Did they just leave it there?
Well, Abu Qatada was concerned about being left behind, and he rides ahead to catch up with the Prophet Muhammad to try to explain what happened.
Okay.
And here's the part that might surprise you. The Prophet, he allows everyone to eat the onager meat, even though they're in Ihram.
Really? I thought that was strictly forbidden.
Well,
I thought hunting was off limits during pilgrimage.
It is, generally speaking.
Okay.
But this story, what this highlights is the flexibility and the nuance of Islamic law. Right. It's not about following these rigid rules blindly, but about understanding the spirit of the law and then applying it with wisdom and compassion.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. I think a lot of people misunderstand that about religious law. So it's not just about following a checklist.
Right.
So what was the Prophet's reasoning in this particular case?
The Sahih Bukhari, it doesn't really explicitly state the Prophet's rationale.
Okay.
But we can kind of dig a little deeper, right?
Yeah, let's do that.
And think about what were some possible reasons. And I think what we have to remember is that the Prophet was known for his incredible balance.
Right.
Right. Like upholding those principles, but also considering the context and the needs of the people.
Yeah.
So in this case, he may have taken into account, the unexpected nature of this whole situation.
Of course.
The potential hardship of leaving that meat behind, especially when they were on this long journey. And then just, the overall spirit of unity and sustenance during pilgrimage. We're all in it together, right?
Yeah.
Remember, Islam is about striving for excellence in all situations.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does mean making those difficult choices where you're prioritizing the greater good.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the story about Moses, when his followers were grumbling because they were hungry.
Right.
And he had to, ask God for sustenance, and God provided quail for them to eat.
Exactly.
And it's a similar kind of concept. I mean, obviously different context, but, when we're struggling, when we're in need, God provides.
Exactly.
And sometimes it comes from unexpected places.
Right. And I think it's about recognizing those blessings
Yeah, absolutely.
and being grateful
Mm.
and not being so rigid in our thinking that we miss those opportunities to, to be kind to one another, to be compassionate.
It's like the prophet was saying, look, I know the rules, but let's not let this perfectly good food go to waste.
Exactly.
We're all in this together.
Exactly. And this whole story really sets this powerful precedent
Right.
for understanding how Islamic rulings can really be applied with sensitivity and discernment.
Right. It encourages us to look beyond just that surface level
Absolutely.
and to consider the underlying principles and the intentions behind those rules.
It's about recognizing, the spirit of the law, not just the letter of the law.
Yeah, exactly. And that story, it beautifully illustrates how even seemingly strict prohibitions
Right.
can have these exceptions based on context
Right.
and necessity.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to remember that the Prophet Muhammad, he wasn't just laying down these laws arbitrarily.
Right.
He was receiving revelation from God.
Right.
And so it's through his example that we learn how to apply these divine principles, in a way that's both just and merciful.
It's a reminder that Islam is a practical religion.
Absolutely.
It's adaptable to the realities of human life.
Right. Speaking of exceptions, this book also highlights another fascinating aspect of hunting during pilgrimage. It's this permission to actually kill certain animals even when you're in the state of Ihram.
This is where I get a little confused, because if hunting is generally forbidden, then why would there be any exceptions at all?
Well, I think it's because, these exceptions reveal that deep understanding of the balance between preserving life and protecting oneself from harm.
Oh, right.
So the Sahih Bukhari, what it says is that a person in Ihram is permitted to kill 5 specific creatures: the crow, the kite, the mouse, the scorpion, and then a rabid dog.
Okay. I mean, at first glance, that might seem cruel or arbitrary,
Right.
but I'm guessing there's a deeper reason behind that.
Absolutely. All of these creatures, they're considered to be harmful
Oh,
or potentially dangerous. So, for example, the crow and the kite, they can spread disease through their scavenging habits. Right.
mice can contaminate food stores and spread illness.
Makes sense.
Scorpions obviously inflict very painful and sometimes venomous stings.
Mhm.
And then a rabid dog, of course, poses a serious threat to human life.
So it's about really prioritizing the safety and well-being of the pilgrims.
Exactly. So even within that sanctity of pilgrimage, where respect for life is so paramount, there's an understanding that taking action to prevent harm, it's permissible.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between upholding the sanctity of life and protecting yourself from genuine threats.
And I'm thinking about, the story of Abraham and how he was commanded to sacrifice his son.
Right.
And obviously in that case, he was ultimately, prevented from doing so.
Right.
But, the intention was there. The obedience to God was there.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes we have to make those difficult choices,
Right.
to protect ourselves, to protect others.
And to trust that God will guide us through those
Right.
difficult decisions. Absolutely. And this reminds me of another anecdote from the book about Aisha,
Okay.
the prophet's wife, and she encounters a salamander.
Ah, yes. Fascinating story, right?
Tell us.
So it illuminates this nuanced approach, I think, to dealing with creatures that are perceived as being harmful. So the prophet, apparently, he referred to the salamander as a bad creature.
Oh, wow.
Probably because of this belief at the time that their venom was really deadly.
Right, right. And people didn't know any better at the time.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that there's no record of the prophet, ordering the salamander to be killed.
Oh, okay.
So I think it suggests that even within, this category of harmful creatures,
Yeah.
there's this careful consideration, right?
Right,
The
it's-
level of threat.
So it's not about like eradicating anything that might be considered, bad or unpleasant.
Right.
It's about acting with wisdom,
Exactly.
discernment.
Choosing to harm only when it's absolutely necessary.
Right. And that's, that's such an important principle, I think, in so many areas of life.
Absolutely.
It's not about, going to extremes.
Right.
It's about finding that balance.
And this careful consideration, I think, for even the smallest of creatures, it really underscores the Islamic emphasis on the sanctity of life.
Right.
and the interconnectedness of all beings.
Yeah, it's a reminder that our actions do have consequences.
Absolutely.
And we should strive to minimize harm
Always.
whenever possible.
And this, respect for life, even those seemingly insignificant creatures, I think connects really beautifully to another key theme from the Sahih Bukhari. It's the sanctity of Mecca itself.
Okay, let's get into that. So Mecca, being the holiest city in Islam, obviously has this special significance. What does it tell us about that? About its unique status?
Well, the Sahih Bukhari, it paints this vivid picture of Mecca as a sanctuary. It's a divinely ordained space where violence, harm, and even disrupting that natural order are strictly forbidden. And there's a powerful hadith. It's narrated by Sayyid bin Abu Sa'id al-Maqburi, and he recalls the Prophet Muhammad's declaration on the day after the conquest of Mecca.
Wow, I can just imagine the scene. The city has just been retaken after years of conflict, and the Prophet stands before the people delivering this crucial message.
It really sets the tone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
For how this city should be treated.
Right.
From that point forward.
So what was the message?
The message was Allah, not people, made Mecca sacred. The Prophet was emphasizing that this sanctity, this wasn't, something that's man-made. This is a divine decree.
So it's an inherent quality of the place itself. It's not something that can be granted or revoked by human beings.
Exactly. And to further emphasize this point, the Prophet lists these specific actions that are just prohibited within the boundaries of Mecca. Things like, bloodshed, cutting down trees, and even disturbing the game.
Now, hold on. Disturbing the game. What exactly does that mean?
Well, according to a hadith narrated by Ibn Abbas, it refers to things like, driving animals out of their shady spots or disrupting their natural habitat.
Oh, okay.
It's really about respecting that natural order
Okay.
within this sacred space and recognizing that, even the animals have a right to exist undisturbed.
That's pretty amazing. It's like an early form of environmental protection.
Yeah.
Is recognizing that delicate balance of the ecosystem
Right.
within Mecca.
Absolutely. And to really understand the significance of this, the Prophet Muhammad, he points out that even he, the messenger of God, was only permitted to fight within Mecca for a few hours on that day of conquest.
It really underscores the reverence that is afforded to this sacred space.
Absolutely. And Ibn Abbas adds another layer to this, He clarifies that the sanctity of Mecca, it existed even before the Prophet Muhammad.
Wow.
And it will continue until the Day of Judgment.
Wow, that's powerful. So we're not just talking about a historical event or some temporary designation.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about an eternal quality.
Exactly.
That's woven into the very fabric of this place.
And it stands, as a testament to that Islamic principle of respecting life in all of its forms.
Yeah.
And recognizing that sacredness of the natural world.
It's a powerful message. And I think it begs the question, what can we learn from this concept of a sacred space and apply it to our own relationship with nature and the world around us?
It's something to ponder, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And that's something I think that we're all going to be thinking about long after this deep dive.
Absolutely.
But before we get lost in contemplation,
Right.
there are a few more fascinating details from this book of Sahih Bukhari
Okay.
that I think are worth exploring.
Yeah, the beauty of this book, I think, is it's in those intricate details and those nuanced explanations.
Yeah.
It's really like a tapestry woven with these threads of wisdom, and each one is revealing a deeper understanding of the Islamic faith.
So let's unravel some of those threads. Let's see what other insights we can uncover.
Sounds good.
So let's delve into some of the specific rulings regarding what is allowed and what's not allowed
Okay.
within the sanctuary of Mecca.
Okay.
Now, I know that we already touched on the prohibition of hunting,
Right.
but what about other activities? For example, can people collect, I don't know, like things that they find on the ground?
That's a great question. And the Sahih Bukhari actually provides really clear guidance on that. So while disturbing that natural environment is strictly forbidden, collecting luqata, which means lost items, it is permitted within Mecca.
So if I'm walking along and I stumble upon, something that someone dropped, I can pick it up.
Yes. But there's a crucial condition.
Okay.
You have to make a public announcement about that found item so that the owner, they have a chance to reclaim it.
That makes sense.
Right.
It's about, being honest, being fair,
Exactly.
respecting, the sanctity of the space,
Yeah.
but also recognizing that people, lose things.
Right.
And we need to have a system in place to deal with those situations.
And it goes back to that balance
Right.
between respecting the sanctity and the practical needs of people.
Now, are there any other exceptions? I mean, what about things that are growing? Are there any exceptions there?
There is actually another interesting exception.
Oh, okay.
It relates to a specific type of grass called alitkir. And this grass was traditionally used by goldsmiths
Uh-huh.
to polish gold. And it was also used in tending to graves.
So is it forbidden to collect that grass since cutting down trees and plants and so on was prohibited?
Interestingly, no.
Okay.
The prophet, he specifically allowed the collection of alithir for these purposes. Again, highlighting the importance of practicality and considering the needs of the community.
And I think that's really important for us to remember today as well. I mean, we live in a world where sometimes we get so caught up in, the rules,
Right.
or we get so caught up in our own ideologies that we forget about the human element.
Right. We forget about compassion.
Exactly.
We forget about, meeting people where they're at.
And I think these stories, these rulings, they remind us that, at the heart of Islam, at the heart of any faith, really, should be this desire to help people, to make life easier, to find solutions that work for everyone.
And it shows that these specific details, they might seem minor, but they reveal a system of thought that's both deeply principled and incredibly adaptable to real-world needs.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of another set of detailed guidelines that we find in Sahih Bukhari. And this is about, what a person in the state of Ihram, what they can wear.
Right.
And again, it's not just about following a random set of rules.
Right.
It's about, aligning one's outward appearance with this inner state of humility and devotion.
Right. Absolutely. So the clothing restrictions during Ihram, they serve a very profound purpose. They're designed to strip away those outward markers of status, wealth, individuality.
Right.
And that creates a sense of equality.
Yeah.
Unity among all the pilgrims.
Right. Like everyone is shedding their worldly attachment and standing before God.
Exactly, as equals.
As equals.
Right. And the garments, that are prescribed for Ihram, they reflect this principle of simplicity.
Yeah, so what are they?
So men, they wear these two simple white sheets. One is called the izar, it's wrapped around the waist.
Right.
And then the rida, and it's draped over the shoulders.
Okay.
And then women, they dress in their regular clothes, but they avoid any form of, adornment or perfume.
So it's really about stripping away those distractions.
Absolutely.
Focusing on the essentials.
Right.
Purity of intention.
That connection with the divine.
Exactly. And it's a powerful reminder that true piety, it doesn't lie in those outward displays or material possessions, but in the state of our hearts.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been so insightful already.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've only just touched the surface.
There's still so much more to explore.
There is.
But for now, let's maybe just pause here.
Okay.
Take a moment to reflect on what we've discussed so far. We've, journeyed through the story of Abu Qatada, explored those exceptions to the hunting prohibition, and really delved into that sanctity of Mecca and those rulings that govern behavior in this space.
Yeah, and it's incredible how these seemingly specific rulings on hunting during pilgrimage, they actually reveal such profound insights into the Islamic worldview.
Absolutely.
The respect for life, that balance between principles and compassion, and then that recognition of that sacredness that exists all around us.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll continue to unravel those threads of wisdom and see what other treasures we can uncover.
I can't wait.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Sahih Bukhari, specifically Book 29, Penalty of Hunting While on Pilgrimage. I think in that last part, we uncovered some really fascinating insights into Islamic principles, that respect for life, that balance between rules and compassion. And then, of course, the sanctity of Mecca as a sacred space. So let's continue our journey and explore another profound theme that's woven through these teachings, the concept of ease and accommodation.
I think that's a topic that really resonates with me because it's so easy to get caught up, right, in the strictness of, the rules and the rituals.
Right.
But Islam, at its core, it's about making faith accessible and meaningful for everyone.
Exactly.
Regardless of their circumstances.
And the Sahih Bukhari, it beautifully illustrates that principle.
Okay.
Through various examples related to, performing Hajj, that pilgrimage to Mecca. So Hajj is it's a deeply spiritual journey, but it also involves these, physically demanding rituals.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is how the teachings, they emphasize making these rituals achievable for everybody, recognizing that people have limitations, offering alternatives.
So it's not about, pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion or hardship. It's about finding a way to participate that honors the spirit of the ritual
Precisely.
while respecting your own physical capabilities.
Right. Like a striking example of that is that ritual of tawaf.
Right.
The act of circling the Kaaba 7 times, it's central to Hajj, a symbolic act of, unity and devotion.
Right.
But you can imagine for some people, particularly the elderly, people with mobility issues, walking around the Kaaba 7 times, it can be challenging.
Yeah. Of course, it's a powerful act of worship, but it does require a certain level of physical stamina.
And the Sahih Bukhari acknowledges that. So there's a hadith that specifically states that if someone's unable to perform the tawaf on foot, they're permitted to do so while riding an animal or even being carried by someone else.
That's a compassionate and practical solution.
Right.
Because it allows everyone to participate in this essential ritual, no matter what their physical limitations are.
Exactly. And it's a beautiful example of how, Islamic teachings really prioritize inclusion.
Right.
They recognize that true devotion, it isn't measured by, physical strength or endurance.
It's the intention of the heart.
Exactly.
The sincerity of that devotion.
And this same principle of accessibility, it extends to other aspects of Hajj as well, like Sa'i, for instance.
Yeah.
That walking back and forth 7 times between the hills of Safa and Marwa.
I've always found that to be such a powerful act of remembrance.
Right.
It commemorates Hagar's desperate search for water for her son in the barren desert.
Exactly. It's a testament to a mother's love and her faith in God's provision. But again, right, it's physically demanding, especially under that hot desert sun.
So are there accommodations for those that struggle to complete that whole distance?
Absolutely. The Sahih Bukhari, it offers some guidance for those situations. And it states that if someone's unable to complete the entire distance on foot, they're permitted to shorten the distance or even just perform a symbolic portion of it.
So again, it's not about adhering to the letter of the law at all costs. It's about honoring the spirit of the ritual.
Exactly.
While respecting individual limitations.
Right. And it's crucial to remember that, these accommodations, they're not seen as, loopholes or shortcuts.
Right.
They're legitimate adaptations that allow individuals to participate to the best of their ability.
Right. It's not about, trying to get out of something.
Right.
It's about, doing what you can.
Exactly. Without, compromising that sincerity of their devotion.
It's a beautiful reminder that faith, it should be a source of strength and support, not a burden or a source of guilt.
Beautifully said. And this message of ease and accommodation, it extends beyond just the physical aspects of pilgrimage. So the Sahih Bukhari also addresses unintentional violations of the rules of Ihram.
Yeah, that's an important point because we're all human and mistakes can happen, especially during, such a spiritually intense experience like Hajj.
Absolutely. The Sahih Bukhari acknowledges that. It emphasizes that, Islam recognizes the possibility of these unintentional mistakes or oversights. Especially during pilgrimage when you're in a heightened spiritual state, you might not always be aware of all of your actions.
So what happens if someone, accidentally violates one of those rules? Are they punished?
Not at all. The Sahih Bukhari offers clear guidance on, how to address those situations. And it emphasizes that, unintentional violations, they don't necessarily invalidate the pilgrimage or, render it unacceptable.
That's reassuring.
Right.
It wouldn't make sense to punish someone for a genuine mistake.
Right.
Especially when they're really trying to fulfill this spiritual obligation.
Exactly. So instead of punishment, there are, specific atonements or, expiations that can be made to rectify that mistake.
Can you give us some examples of what those might be?
Sure. So the types of atonements, they vary.
Okay.
Depending on the nature of the violation. So for example, if, someone accidentally kills an animal that was forbidden during Ihram,
Right.
they might be required to offer a sacrifice. Essentially providing food for the poor.
Okay.
As a way of, acknowledging the taking of a life.
So it's about taking responsibility for that mistake and then making amends in a way that benefits the community.
Precisely. It's a system that emphasizes justice and mercy.
Yeah.
recognizing that we are fallible, we are human, but also upholding the sanctity of the pilgrimage
Right.
and the importance of adhering to its rules.
It reminds us that even when we make mistakes, we can always, seek forgiveness and strive to do better.
Exactly. It's a reminder that, that relationship with God, it's an ongoing journey
Yeah.
filled with, triumphs and stumbles. And it's often through those stumbles that we learn the most valuable lessons.
Absolutely. So we've talked about how Sahih Bukhari emphasizes this ease and accommodation in the physical performance of Hajj rituals
Right.
and in addressing, unintentional violations of the rules.
Mm,
Are there any other examples of this principle at play?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's look at another aspect of the Sahih Bukhari, that might seem tangential, but it connects to this broader theme of ease and accommodation. And it's the topic of, clothing and adornment during Ihram.
Right. We touched on that a little bit earlier, talking about, the simple white garments
Right.
worn by men and those restrictions on adornment for women.
Exactly. And the Sahih Bukhari provides these very detailed guidelines, on what's considered permissible attire for both men and women during Ihram. And these guidelines, they go beyond just listing specific garments. They delve into the underlying principles, the intentions.
So it's not just about, blindly following these rules.
Right.
It's about understanding that deeper meaning.
Exactly. And one of the key themes that emerges is this idea of, simplicity, humility. Those restrictions on clothing, they're really meant to strip away those outward markers of, status,
Right.
wealth, individuality.
Yeah, fostering that sense of equality and unity.
Exactly. Among all the pilgrims.
Right. It's like everybody's shedding their worldly identities and just standing before God as equal.
Precisely. And their hearts focused on spiritual purification. And this principle of simplicity, it's reflected in those prescribed garments.
Yeah.
Right? For men, as we discussed, it's those two simple white sheets.
Right.
These are in the Rita. And for women, it's their regular clothing, but with, the restriction of, covering their head and face.
Right.
Avoiding jewelry, makeup, perfume.
So it's really about letting go of the outward displays.
Exactly.
Focusing on that inner state
Of the heart.
of the heart. In Sahih Bukhari, it emphasizes that this focus on simplicity, it extends beyond just outward appearance.
Absolutely.
It's about cultivating that inner state of humility and detachment from worldly possessions.
Right. From those desires.
Yeah, and while those restrictions might seem, strict on the surface, Sahih Bukhari, it also incorporates elements of ease and accommodation within these guidelines. So for instance, there's flexibility regarding the type and the quality of, those white sheets
Right.
that are worn by men. The emphasis is on simplicity and uniformity.
Right. Not, expensive fabrics or designs.
Right, so it's not about creating this financial burden or making pilgrimages inaccessible to those of, modest means.
Exactly. The teachings recognize that, everyone should be able to participate in this sacred journey, regardless of their financial status. And that same principle applies to, the guidelines for women's clothing as well.
All right.
While adornment is restricted, the teachings emphasize that women should dress in a way that's comfortable and practical.
Right.
Considering factors like the weather,
Of course.
the physical demands of the rituals. So even within these guidelines,
Right.
there's that recognition, right, of individual needs and circumstances.
It's about finding that balance
Exactly.
between adhering to those principles of simplicity and humility while ensuring that the pilgrimage experience is accessible and manageable
Right, for everyone.
for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this emphasis on ease and accommodation, I think it really speaks to the heart of Islam. It's about making faith a source of strength and support,
Absolutely.
not a burden or a source of anxiety.
Beautifully said. It's really about recognizing that, that relationship with God is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And that journey should be one of growth, compassion, understanding.
This has been so enlightening.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gaining this whole new perspective on the teachings of Islam.
I'm thrilled to hear that. But we're not done yet. There's still so much more to uncover in the Sahih Bukhari.
There is. Oh my goodness.
Shall we continue to explore?
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's shift our focus to another fascinating aspect of hunting during pilgrimage. And this might seem, paradoxical at first.
Oh, okay.
Right. So as we've established, hunting is generally forbidden during Ihram, right?
All right.
However, the Sahih Bukhari outlines specific exceptions to this rule.
Okay.
And these exceptions, they reveal this nuanced understanding of the sanctity of life
Okay.
and the need to protect oneself from harm.
A paradox. I'm intrigued.
Hey,
Tell me more.
Well, we've already talked about one set of exceptions, right? The 5 harmful creatures that a Muhrim is permitted to kill. The crow, the kite, the mouse, the scorpion, and then the rabid dog.
Right, right.
And that rationale behind that exception is the inherent danger that these creatures pose
Right.
to human health and safety.
It's about recognizing that even within this sanctity of pilgrimage, taking action to prevent harm, it's sometimes necessary.
Yeah.
But you mentioned another exception.
Exactly. This exception, it relates to self-defense
Okay.
against wild animals. So the Sahih Bukhari, it addresses this question of, is a pilgrim allowed to defend themselves if they're attacked by a wild beast?
Okay, that's a fascinating question. What does it say?
It's a nuanced answer.
Okay.
So the permissibility of actually killing an animal in self-defense. It depends on a number of factors, things like the level of threat, the availability of other means of defense, and then the pilgrim's own intention.
So it's not just a blanket permission to kill any animal that seems threatening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of consideration involved here.
Absolutely. The Sahih Bukhari emphasizes that killing an animal, even in self-defense, it should always be a last resort. It's only permissible when there's this, genuine and imminent threat, and there's just no other means of escape or protection available.
Right, so it's about respecting the sanctity of life.
Yeah.
Even in a situation where one's own safety is at stake.
Exactly. And the pilgrim's intention, it plays a crucial role as well.
Right.
So the Sahih Bukhari clearly states that killing an animal out of, fear or anger, that's not permissible.
Right.
It has to be done solely out of that necessity of self-preservation.
So acting with a clear mind.
Yeah.
Not out of panic or aggression.
Exactly. And even if a pilgrim is forced to kill an animal in self-defense, Sahih Bukhari, it recommends making amends, for taking a life by offering a sacrifice or giving charity.
So acknowledging that gravity.
Right.
Of taking a life, even in a situation where, it was necessary for survival.
Exactly. And it's a powerful reminder that even in the most challenging situations, we should strive to act with compassion, with mindfulness,
Right.
and that sense of responsibility for our actions.
These teachings on self-defense, they really highlight that delicate balance between preserving life and protecting oneself from harm. Recognizing that inherent value of all creatures while acknowledging the need to safeguard human life.
Right, when faced with a genuine threat.
When faced with a genuine
That's
threat.
exactly. And this balance is a theme that runs throughout the Sahih Bukhari, weaving its way through, teachings on hunting, on clothing, rituals, and even, our interactions with the natural world.
This deep dive is proving to be this profound exploration of Islamic principles and their relevance to our lives even today.
I'm so glad you're finding it insightful. But we're not quite finished yet. There's one more fascinating aspect of the Sahih Bukhari that I'd like to kind of dig into.
Oh, yeah.
It delves into a topic that touches on the very heart of, Islamic devotion.
Okay.
It's that concept of fulfilling those religious obligations on behalf of those who are unable to do so.
That's something that, I've always found really moving about Islam. This sense of communal responsibility and the recognition that we can, act on behalf of others, even in their absence.
Exactly. And in the Sahih Bukhari, it provides beautiful examples of this principle in action,
Okay.
specifically related to performing Hajj on behalf of others.
So in what situations might someone, perform Hajj on behalf of another person?
Well, one of the most common situations is when someone has passed away
Right.
before fulfilling their obligation
Right.
to perform Hajj. So the Sahih Bukhari recounts this touching story of a woman from the tribe of Juhayna whose mother had died before she could fulfill her vow to perform Hajj.
That must have been heartbreaking for her, knowing that her mother passed away without fulfilling this important pillar of faith.
It was. And so this woman, she approaches the Prophet Muhammad,
Right.
seeking guidance on how to honor her mother's unfulfilled vow.
Mm-hmm.
And the Prophet, known for his wisdom and compassion, advises her to perform Hajj on her mother's behalf.
So even in death, the opportunity to fulfill this spiritual obligation, it isn't lost.
Exactly. It's a testament to the mercy and the inclusivity of Islamic teachings.
Mm.
And the Prophet's words to this woman, they really illustrate this beautifully. He says, perform Hajj on her behalf. Had there been a debt on your mother, would you have paid it or not? So pay Allah's debt as he has more right to be paid.
It's a powerful way of framing the situation.
Right.
Just as we would, fulfill a financial obligation on behalf of a loved one, we can also fulfill their spiritual obligation.
Precisely.
Acknowledging, that importance of fulfilling our duties to God.
Right. And it's not just about fulfilling vows either. The Sahih Bukhari also mentions situations where someone can perform Hajj on behalf of a living person.
Okay.
Who's unable to make the journey because of, old age, illness.
So recognizing that not everyone has those same physical capabilities.
Right.
And offering a way for those who can't make that journey themselves to still benefit.
Exactly.
From those spiritual rewards.
Right. It's a testament to, that compassion, that flexibility within Islamic law.
Yeah.
Upholding the importance of, fulfilling those religious duties, but acknowledging that, individuals have limitations.
These teachings on, performing Hajj on behalf of others really highlight that communal aspect of Islam.
Absolutely.
It's not just about individual piety. It's about supporting and caring for one another.
Right. On those spiritual journeys.
On those spiritual journeys.
Beautifully said. And this sense of, communal responsibility coupled with those principles of ease and accommodation, it really creates a framework of faith that's both deeply personal and profoundly inclusive.
Yeah. This deep dive has been such an eye-opening experience. We've explored so many fascinating facets of these Islamic teachings, uncovering those layers of wisdom and compassion. It's amazing how, it's woven into the very fabric of this faith.
I'm so glad to hear that. But hold on tight because we're not done yet.
Oh, there's more.
There are a few more, gems of wisdom waiting to be unearthed.
Wow.
Let's take a short pause, gather our thoughts, and then embark on that final leg of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our Echoes of Ihsan deep dive into the Sahih Bukhari. Book 29, Penalty of Hunting While on Pilgrimage. We've been exploring a wide range of topics from, the story of Abu Qatada and his encounter with that onager.
Right.
To, the nuances of self-defense against wild animals during pilgrimage. But in this final segment, I want to shift our focus from those, specific rulings and anecdotes to the broader implications of these teachings.
Yeah, I think that's a really important step, to kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
Right.
What are these rulings actually telling us, about the Islamic worldview, that perspective on our relationship with nature, our responsibilities to creation, that importance of balance in our lives?
Those are big questions. I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
Well, one of the most striking takeaways for me is just this emphasis on respect for all forms of life. Even those creatures that we might consider, insignificant or even bothersome.
Yeah, and I'm thinking back to, the Hadith about not disturbing the game in Mecca.
Exactly.
Even chasing an animal away from its resting spot, it's considered this violation of that sacred space.
It is. It's about recognizing the inherent worth of every creature.
Yeah.
Regardless of its size or its perceived usefulness.
Right.
To humans.
Yeah, it's not about, what can this creature do for me?
Right.
It's about, recognizing its place.
Exactly.
In the grand scheme of things.
And this respect for life, it extends far beyond just the context of pilgrimage. It's a fundamental principle within Islam that emphasizes treating all of God's creations with care and compassion.
Yeah.
And the Quran, it beautifully articulates this principle, highlighting that balance of nature, that interconnectedness of all living things.
It almost sounds like an early form of environmental ethics.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, a recognition of that delicate web of life and a responsibility to protect it.
And it's a message that I think holds so much relevance, today as we grapple with these pressing challenges: climate change, habitat destruction,
Right.
Species extinction. These ancient teachings, they remind us that, we're not the sole proprietors of this planet. We are, part of this larger, intricate ecosystem that requires our care, our stewardship.
It's a call to action to, live more sustainably, to consume mindfully, and to, advocate for those policies that protect the natural world.
Absolutely. And woven into that respect for life is that concept of sacred space,
Yeah.
which we've talked about a lot, throughout this deep dive Mecca, as we've discussed. It's the sanctuary. Violence, harm, and disruption of the natural order, they're all strictly prohibited. And within that sacred space, even the animals are afforded protection.
Yeah, it's like it creates this zone of peace and respect
Yeah.
for all beings. And I think it really serves as a model for how we might approach other spaces
It does,
in
yeah.
in our world.
It challenges us to consider, like, how can we create more of those sacred spaces, in our lives, in our community?
Yeah.
Places where we prioritize peace, harmony,
Yeah.
that reverence for life.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, anything grand or monumental.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as, tending a garden with care, creating, a peaceful corner in our home for reflection,
Yeah.
or advocating for the protection of, natural areas in our community.
Exactly. It's about expanding that circle of compassion and recognizing that sacredness that exists all around us,
Yeah.
not just in, designated holy places.
And I think that resonates deeply with the concept of Ihsan.
It does.
Striving for excellence, pleasing God
In all aspects of our lives.
in all aspects of our life, and bringing that same intentionality and care to our interactions with the natural world.
Exactly. And this brings us to I think another key takeaway from these teachings on hunting during pilgrimage. That importance of balance. We've seen this theme emerge in so many different ways. That balance between, upholding the rituals, recognizing those individual limitations. The
Right.
balance between preserving life and protecting ourselves from harm.
Right.
The balance between our needs and the needs of, the natural world.
It's about finding that middle path,
It is, yeah.
that sweet spot where we can live in harmony
Right.
with ourselves, with others, and with the planet that we inhabit.
Exactly. It's a lifelong pursuit, that constant striving for equilibrium. But it's a pursuit, I think, that's definitely worth undertaking.
Yeah.
It leads to a life of meaning, of purpose, and deep connection. And I think through it all, we catch glimpses of Ihsan, that beautiful concept of striving for excellence and pleasing God in all that we do.
It's a reminder that even our seemingly, mundane actions,
Yeah.
the choices that we make each and every day,
Mhm.
they have the potential to be acts of worship,
Right.
expressions of our love for God,
Did you do?
and our commitment to living a virtuous life.
Beautifully said. And, for those listening who are eager to explore these concepts further, I encourage you to delve into the Sahih Bukhari, discover its treasures for yourselves.
And beyond that, it's about taking these teachings and applying them
Yeah.
to our lives. How can we infuse our, daily actions
Yeah.
with greater compassion, with balance, with respect for life
Right.
in all of its forms?
Yeah.
How can we create more
Yeah.
of those sacred spaces
Yeah.
in our world?
Those are questions worth pondering. And as we navigate the complexities of modern life,
Right.
let's remember that wisdom that's embedded within these ancient teachings. Let's strive to embody Ihsan in all that we do, seeking that delicate balance
Right.
between our spiritual aspirations
Yeah.
and our responsibilities to the world around us.
Thank you so much for joining us
Thank you.
on this Echoes of Ihsan deep dive. We hope that you've gained a new perspective on the beauty, the wisdom, that enduring relevance of Islamic teachings. Until next time, may your journey be filled with peace, with purpose, and that pursuit of Ihsan.